Hello and welcome to a new video here on my channel. Today I'm presenting to you my part 2 of the story, The Echoes of a New World. I hope you really like it, and then let's start right with the story and don't beat around the bush anymore. Let's start right with the story. Let's go.
As Timothy continued digging, he noticed that beneath the white material lay ordinary stone. A few seconds later, the floor gave way, and he barely had time to react before tumbling down onto a hard, black surface in an entirely different dungeon, clearly situated beneath the beginner's level. Okay, this is really weird. Why did I end up in a completely different dungeon, but whatever. Thought Timothy as he surveyed the pitch-black caverns, a stark contrast to the silvery white corridors and chambers of the pyramid. Yet what truly caught his eye were a pair of white and gold wings, held together by countless golden filaments that shimmered and shifted like liquid. They were the legendary Icarus wings Timothy had read so much about online, an ultra-rare legacy item of epic rarity. In simple terms, this was a one-of-a-kind opportunity he couldn't pass up. When Timothy stood up, a level 0 vampire wandering into an advanced dungeon, the level 80 players locked in combat with the boss monster stared in confusion. They watched a player descend from the ceiling and sprint straight for the artifact they'd risked everything to claim. Even the boss monster seemed bewildered by an event that defied every rule. A level 0 character should never materialize in a high-end dungeon and snatch its treasure. But by the time they recovered, it was too late. The vampire lady had already grasped the legacy item. With a mischievous smile and a mysterious glint in her eyes, she reached into her bag just as an enemy attack hurtled toward her. Equipping the inventory item completed her tutorial. In a cloud of pixels, she vanished, instantly teleported back to the beginner village. The fire lance shot into empty air, leaving both the attacking players and the boss monster in stunned silence. No dungeon had ever been cleared, or bypassed, in quite that way. And the audacious player who did it hadn't even officially started the game yet. I still can't believe that actually worked. How did it even happen? Oh well, at least it was fun. And no developer can take away something I obtained legitimately. I didn't hack anything. Can this game even be hacked? Whatever it was a blast. Now I've got awesome Icarus wings in an inventory twice, maybe 3 times as large as everyone else's. Hell yeah, I'm so cool. Thought Timothy as he materialized in front of the beginner village. The village lay in a valley, just like countless other starter towns in fantasy games, and the only thing missing was a river flowing through its center to complete the cliché, he mused, as his female vampire avatar approached. A village emblem floating above the gate showed no faction affiliation, indicating that this neutral settlement welcomed every humanoid, heteromorphic, and demi-human race without prejudice. This place looks stunningly realistic, graphically speaking, but it's just so classic. Same wooden palisades with spikes on top, same newbie camp feel. I wonder what makes this game different from all the others. Thought Timothy as he reached the gate, and admitted to himself that, unlike most games where you can teleport everywhere, here you actually had to walk. Or at least, teleportation didn't seem to be unlocked yet. Halt, traveler, what is your purpose in this village? Called a guard with brown hair, red eyes, and a pale face. His sharp canine teeth marked him as a low-rank, level 15 vampire. I'd like a place to stay and to become an adventurer. Stammered Timothy, nervously brushing his long, silken white hair. Then you've come to the right place. We always need extra hands, just make sure you don't lose your ID when you travel abroad, you'll need it. Grumbled a second guard, bored and terse. Despite the cliché greeting, Timothy couldn't help admiring how lifelike and consistent the NPC's behaviors were. Only when Timothy stepped through the gate did she realize she was no longer in Lumina, the third world of Pandora, but back on Pandora Prime itself, and she somehow hadn't noticed the realm shift. Turning around, she spotted green grass, a forest, and distant mountains, and wondered how she could have missed this before. It must have been excitement that made her so oblivious. As he turned back toward the village, Timothy saw that he could now view every player's level above their heads. Most were between level 5 and level 15, with stronger adventurers peaking at level 20, the maximum rank allowed in the beginner village. The settlement had everything one expects in an anime-style RPG, a tavern, an adventurer's guild, and more. The guild system seemed well thought out, with ranks, levels, and clear explanations of adventurer duties, much like mercenaries, but they used their strength to protect the kingdom, slay monsters, and explore dangerous regions, all for profit. The guild issued quests, and players with sufficient funds could even commission jobs for others, hiring appropriate protectors. Next to the adventurers, guild stood the merchants, guild, functionally similar, but focused on commerce, patents, investments, banking, and the like. This is exactly where I need to go, decided Timothy, bypassing the adventurers, guild to head straight into the merchants' hall, where he addressed a woman at the front desk. Without hesitation, he dumped a pile of valuable materials on the counter from his inventory, confident that no one here could mug him. This village was a peace zone, after all. Anything forbidden by others simply couldn't be done to you unless you allowed it. In short, because Timothy didn't want anyone stealing from him, no one could. And no one could harm him unless he wanted to be harmed, an arrangement he'd read made these starter villages the fairest and friendliest, especially with honest NPCs. Allegedly, other zones had deceptive or crooked vendors. I have materials to sell. Could you please appraise them and tell me their value? Asked Timothy, well aware that appraisals here were free, a loophole worth exploiting. He felt no guilt abusing the system, any advantage was a plus. Of course, he could theoretically buy the entire studio and force the developers to grant all his wishes, but that would defeat the purpose of the game and wouldn't even dent his metaphorical wallet. I really hate pay-to-win games. I won't spend real money here, unless I get too frustrated, then I'll do what every rich player does. Throw cash at the problem until it goes away. In real life, I can't do much with my fragile body anyway. I mean, I can barely step outside without taking precautions. Gotta put my money to use somewhere. Lucky my parents are filthy rich, otherwise I'd be screwed. If I'd been born anywhere else, I probably wouldn't have lived past 5. Timothy reflected, torn between gratitude and guilt. As the appraiser behind the desk examined his resources, Timothy listened to other players chatting. Did you hear they're planning to add guild systems in the next or maybe the one after next update? Guilds can form organizations and earn bonus rewards in special events, monster hunts and the like. That'll be awesome for player groups. A dragon-type player raved. His scaly form looked like armor, yet his build was lanky and built for speed. Timothy then overheard talk of a high-difficulty dungeon discovered in Pandora's northern reaches, a floating island topped by a palace supposedly tied to the lost continent of Avalon. You know, Avalon would be a great guild name, but if that dungeon really is top tier, conquering it will be tough. Maybe someday I'll claim it first and turn Avalon into a guild headquarters, a floating guild. It could be about sanctity, light and darkness, positive and negative, yin and yang. That'd be a cool theme. He thought, already dreaming of future conquests. Now the only question is whether I should go solo or join a team. If I clear dungeons with other teams, I'll have to share the experience points. And honestly, I'd rather not. I've spent most of my life alone. I have almost no friends. I could still find a group in-game to chat with. I have hardly any friends outside the game. It's ironic that the son of one of the world's richest men has so few friends. Most would only be after my money anyway. Marriage and kids aren't for me, unless my parents demand grandchildren. No thanks. Too many political intrigues and conflicting interests. Better to stay by myself. Not that my frail body would find anyone, either, Timothy thought as he gazed around the grand, gold-trimmed hall. The other players' glances showed surprise, and maybe irritation, to see a vampire strolling in daylight. On the other hand, sunlight doesn't instantly immolate weaker vampires, as Pandora's official bestiary states. It's amazing that vampires can walk in daylight, though I'd need heavy sun protection if I were a normal vampire. Yet my ancestor of twilight title obviously neutralizes my sunlight weakness. I wonder what other effects this title grants. Too bad I can't view them directly, Timothy mused as the receptionist finished examining his hall and drew his attention back. The soft white glow of lanterns in the corners reflected in her eyes and hair as she explained how rare his minerals were. You have a fist-sized chunk of adamantite, About 750 gold coins, depending on purity. Then this melon-sized piece of mithril is worth 590 coins. A thumb-sized lumitite chunk is 1,680 coins. And you've got 2 kilograms of orichalcum, the living metal, worth 920 coins. We don't even have that much gold in the entire merchants' guild at this outpost. She said, surprise and confusion on her face. Clearly she hadn't expected someone to deliver such treasures. Timothy thought about which materials to sell. He decided to keep the living metal and the lumitite for himself. They were the most valuable, and sold only half of the rest. Now I want to upgrade an artifact I already own. I know you can combine certain materials with items before using them. Could you refer me to someone who can help? He asked, immediately sensing VIP treatment after his sale, by far the easiest way to get fair prices without peddling goods yourself. I must admit, this game isn't like typical MMOs where you mash buttons in PvP. This is so much more realistic and detailed, an open world, not just a rule-bound RPG. I think I'm really going to enjoy this. Timothy thought as the receptionist led him to a private waiting room, promising to fetch someone better suited to assist. While he waited, he admired the play of light in the room, the greenery outside, and realized this felt like a second chance, a new life in another world. If there were such a thing as isekai or reincarnation, this would be it. His body was failing him, and though his family was wealthy, the world outside was toxic. He had little choice. So, would I want to be reborn in another world? Timothy wondered, and at that very question, the surroundings seemed to tremble ever so slightly, as if the world itself had answered. He didn't notice the subtle quiver of the table or the air's flicker, but a sense of awe, magic, and yearning hung so thickly it was almost visible, yet none of the hundreds of thousands of players perceived it. Timothy focused on his task and managed, as intended, to fuse his lumitite and orichalcum with the epic rarity Icarus wings. These two rare, powerful materials became one with the wings at great cost, but having plenty of resources, success mattered more than expense. When Timothy examined the new stats on the Icarus wings, his eyes widened in delighted surprise and a smile lit his avatar's face, an expression that, while possible, usually required deliberate effort. This is fascinating. I've apparently erased the wings' main level restriction, and given them potential to develop their own ego through prolonged use. What a powerful item. Orichalcum can grant objects sentience, and lumitite amplifies that potential. Some properties are still hidden, though those remain blacked out. This could get really interesting. And the biggest limitation is gone. They auto-scale to my level, even though they might still be capped at 20. Can you even compare item rarity to player levels? I need to investigate that. Timothy thought excitedly, yet the true surprise came when his hand touched the feathers and he actually felt their texture. His brow furrowed in confusion. This sensation hadn't existed when he first logged in. So those glitches, those paranormal rumors I heard are real. But why and how? Like the runes in the temple, I shouldn't have been able to read those. Now the game is suddenly more real without explanation. What on earth is happening? Not that I'm complaining. It's a pleasant surprise, but it's still incredibly weird. A game shouldn't randomly become more real. Something fishy is going on. Timothy thought, though his curiosity and excitement prevailed. He equipped the enhanced Icarus wings, and a strange feeling washed over him. It actually felt as if two wings sprouted from his body, and he sensed their movement. His brow relaxed as he savored the sensation of having wings, then opened his status window again at a thought. Let's see what styles I can unlock. Timothy thought as he browsed the available skins, and realized he could actually buy them with real money. He didn't understand why the game would sell such a pointless item, but customizing appearance served multiple purposes for him. Player Lilith Everblaze, may we speak? A suited man suddenly said, as if appearing from nowhere. The NPCs around Timothy didn't react, suggesting this visitor was either a developer or Vega herself, the deity-like AI managing Pandora.
Certainly, I'd be happy to speak with you. What would you like to discuss? Responded Timothy, one eyebrow raised, a gesture he could see mirrored in the wall's reflection, his dream body moving exactly as he intended. Nothing extraordinary. We simply wish to talk about you and your playstyle. You acquired those Icarus wings in a very unusual way, and we have limited options for how to proceed. We can discuss this here or in a private setting, wherever you prefer. Said the game developer. I'd rather stay right here, wherever you plan to take me. It feels a bit like a kidnapping, though I know it isn't. Said Timothy, in his avatar Lilith Everblaze. At this, Lilith Everblaze watched the developer cross his arms and ponder. His black hair was cropped short. He wore glasses and a black suit with a white tie over a white t-shirt, a somewhat odd combination. You now have a few options. First, you can voluntarily surrender the Icarus wings, and we'll leave your triple-sized inventory untouched, and we'll drop the matter entirely. Or, if you refuse, there's nothing we can do. As you know, game rules prohibit us from rolling back a player's progress. We have no authority to remove items you obtained without hacking. Since you didn't cheat but exploited a bug, you're completely within your rights. We can negotiate compensation or an equivalent exchange if you return part of what you obtained. Of course, we could simply regenerate the artifact and restart the boss fight for the other party who wanted the wings. We could reimburse the other faction at minimal cost, or you could return your wings. Alternatively, you could release some of your inventory space so we can shrink it slightly. These are all your choices. I don't want to give up any of my achievements, but I'm okay with reducing my inventory a bit. I don't need it so large right now, and in exchange I'd ask to be allowed to change my wing skin at will, and to keep only one pair equipped. I also think it'd be fair to grant me one extra equipment slot for legacy items, just in case I find more wings later. Said Timothy, as Lilith Everblaze. You're bold in your negotiations, but I see your points. You could have simply declined. I agree this is a fair trade, a smaller inventory for an additional artifact slot. We'll need to specify details. Normally you can only equip one pair of wings or one legacy item bound to your avatar. I can't give you unlimited artifact slots, that'd be too much. But I can grant you one free extra slot in exchange for downsizing your inventory, specifically for a second pair of wings. Said the developer, and Timothy agreed. How is this supposed to work now? Will you just wave your magic wand and my inventory will shrink and my second slot for another pair of wings will open? Asked Timothy with curiosity in his voice. But before he finished speaking, he realized something was fundamentally wrong. His voice no longer sounded like a man's but matched Lilith Everblaze, his avatar. Noticing the shift, he studied the game developer with a questioning look. The developer's own expression was equally puzzled. He made a few hand gestures and a mirror materialized out of thin air, his reflection looking ever more confused. What the hell? You can see facial expressions in this game. I never programmed that. Where did that code come from? The developer said, clearly irritated. Seeing the developer openly bewildered only reinforced Timothy's sense that these anomalies were abnormal. He wondered whether it was even legal for the developer to display such surprise to an unknown player. Why are you so surprised? This is your game. And if it isn't, if an external cause is responsible, are you even allowed to show that so openly to someone like me? Timothy asked. Silence fell for a few seconds. The developer turned away from the mirror, then back to Timothy, studying the avatar thoughtfully. Honestly, there's no real reason to keep this secret. Of course my company wouldn't want too many people knowing, but I doubt it makes much difference whether you know or not. I don't even know who you are in real life, but the odds of you being influential are low. And even if you were, my superiors couldn't link me to you. Frankly, I'm only moderately motivated here, so I don't care what anyone thinks. Maybe I've already made a few mistakes, but whatever. As long as I keep my job and get paid, that's fine. Besides, rumors of anomalies in our game are already widespread online. It won't change much that you know it wasn't planned. Actually, it feeds my curiosity. I want to know why this game keeps getting random updates. I'm not involved, yet I'm responsible for avatar behavior. The developer explained, giving no name but making sense to Timothy. Though the sudden facial realism was confusing, far more pressing concerns lay ahead than the game's increasingly lifelike visuals. Before long, a new artifact slot appeared for a second pair of unique class wings, extraordinary items that could be either imbued, or engraved, or both. In any case, it was a slot reserved for another set of wings. May I ask why you're so focused on wings? What's your goal? What do you plan to do with your avatar in the future? What's your character's theme? The developer asked just before stepping through a glowing white door that had appeared behind him and vanished moments later. Timothy felt the developer was as strange as he was. What proved far more interesting in the next hours of gameplay was how to defeat monsters and how the entire system was structured. When Timothy reached level 5, he realized the wings were an enormous bonus. He could simply fly above monsters that couldn't, farming them from above. Bows and arrows were fairly useless at first. Standard starter gear was weak, but with enough practice and arrows, they still worked. Your bow skill requirements have been met. Archery skill level 1 unlocked. Announced a voice in the air as Timothy hovered on his 2 wings above a horde of antelope-like humanoids known in Pandora as kobolds. Interesting. So skills aren't just special abilities like magic, but also natural talents, like archery. I wonder what the cap is. Can you level higher, or do you just unlock the next tier when you meet certain conditions? Thought Timothy as another kobold sprang from the bushes, brandishing a sling. The rest of the kobold band lay dead, riddled with arrows and dissolving into small violet cubes that sparkled as they drifted upward. The dark violet cubes looked beautiful to Timothy. He loved purples and violets, and their weightless, glittering movement was mesmerizing. When the kobold's sling stone flew at him, he lazily tracked its arc, smiling at how gravity still governed even this gaming world as the rock harmlessly flew past. Interesting. I'll finish this one off, then see what loot drops. Timothy thought as he fired arrow after arrow, moving side to side in midair to make targeting harder. The kobold band panicked. Perhaps 5 escaped, but Timothy recognized it was mostly luck. After the last kobold dissolved, he landed in the center of the clearing and began collecting loot. Kobold hides, kobold meat. A bit unsettling, since these semi-intelligent creatures felt like more than mere animals, alongside clothing, weapons, and other gear. Most intriguing were octahedron-shaped whitish crystals. Interesting. The status window only shows metaphysical object. What does that mean? Thought Timothy as he stuffed a pile of crystals and other potentially useful materials into his inventory. He realized that NPCs and monsters dropped everything they carried, since they had no inventory, so he assumed players must drop all equipped items upon death, except for those in their inventory. That would be a serious issue if someone died fully decked out. One notable exception seemed to be the bound artifact, the Icarus wings, considered part of the avatar's body, so they weren't dropped. It also seemed possible for bound items that weren't bodily attachments to remain with the player. Okay, so I must be careful. If I die, I'll lose XP, levels, and my equipped gear. It's unlikely I'll respawn naked. Probably the game grants basic clothing. Could I exploit that as a glitch to farm infinite fabric materials? No. That'd only give a few clothes and require waiting minutes each time. Not worth it. Thought Timothy. As he pondered, he suddenly heard rustling in the bushes and approaching footsteps. A sense of dread washed over him. In quick succession, 3 players burst from the forest, and then the sky darkened as about 200 identical, fox-like creatures emerged, bringing night with them. The stars flickered overhead, and a menacing boss HP bar materialized at the top of his view, a boss fight. Level 45 Silver Moon Hare, King of the Forest. Announced a voice in his ear. Run, everyone run. We can't defeat this monster. We need to get out of its aggro range before it turns its attention to us. Flew a command from a player who looked like a seraph, a priest rookie with 6 tiny wings and white and gold healer's robes. Beside him ran a female character, hard to define in this game, her elven ears and backward curved horns complementing a massive warhammer in her hand. Timothy only furrowed his brow. Hey you, didn't I say to run if you don't want to lose levels and gear? Snapped another from the group, resembling a demon. But Timothy paid no mind. He was fixated on something far more intriguing, a puddle of rainwater reflecting a perfect mirror.
Suddenly, all the foxes crouch and then launch themselves at the fleeing players with incredible speed. The ground collapses beneath their feet, branches snap, and a series of small shockwaves follows. A massive dust cloud billows up where hundreds of identical foxes once stood, yet the reflection shows something entirely different. Timothy smiles as she knocks an arrow to her bowstring and takes aim, not at the real scene but at its reflection, which proves far harder than it sounds. The arrow screams from the bow, slicing through the air like a hot knife through butter yet missing its target by several meters. The silver moon fox in the mirror regards her with curious eyes. Damn, I can't just shoot blind. I can't see my target, and constantly tracking the reflection is too hard. I'm not that good at archery. Now the only question is how best to tackle this. I can't see the real foe, but I know where it is thanks to the reflection, since illusions can't harm me. Thought Timothy as she stowed her bow and arrow and cracked her knuckles. Minus 12% HP. Minus 2% 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 HP. Okay, crap, what was that? Why am I taking damage? Thought Timothy as she spun around, trying to find the source of the harm, but saw nothing. Watching the countless clones of the silver moon fox, she realized this method wouldn't work. Illusions did no damage. One thing struck her as she studied the illusions: they made no sound. Even the real fox barely made a whisper, but it did make a barely audible noise, unlike its clones. Another difference: the illusions had no physical form and didn't stir the air. Focusing solely on the pool's reflections, her strategy for this boss fight. Timothy understood this would be one of the easiest bosses she'd face in the future. The creature only had level 20 stats, minimal HP, resistance, and speed. Its only edge was mastery of illusions. As Timothy engaged the boss one-on-one, her combat instincts sharpened. It felt like her element: exhilarating, invasive, intoxicating, exhausting. The world around her narrowed until only she and the silver moon fox remained. It was a long, grueling battle. Every time it seemed won, the monster would vanish into the forest, only to return. But Timothy pressed on. It was a blessing that fatigue didn't exist here. Conditions met. Unarmed combat and short sword mastery have fused into melee weapon mastery. Announced a voice in her ear. Man, it's distracting hearing these damned voices in a fight. And if it weren't for this curse, this area effect that prevents me from flying, I'd just swoop down and end this easily. Thought Timothy. Just when she feared she couldn't win, something flew at her from the side. She recognized it as a projectile. She drew her short sword from her inventory and sliced it mid-air. It burst open, spilling green liquid over her, healing her instantly. Her lost HP surged back, and a familiar voice reached her. Hey bro, we've come back to help. We saw you using reflections to distinguish the real monster from its illusions. We'll back you up, said the angel priest player. Got you covered, said Timothy as she felt the boss's bite in her arm. She lost a chunk of HP, but the monster was weakened, and she seized the chance to plunge her sword into its eye. Ordinarily, the level gap would make this impossible, but realistic weak points existed in Pandora, and she exploited one to kill the beast in a single blow. Congratulations on the first solo elimination of a boss in the game. As a reward for setting a new record, you receive 10 skill points and advance 5 levels. Announced Vega's voice in the air. That's unfair, we tried, too. Now we have to wait 2 hours for the boss to respawn, complained the demon player. She had wine red skin, red eyes, short black hair, and carried a war hammer on her shoulder, wearing light, mobile armor.
And thank you for your attention. If you liked part 2 of the story, The Echoes of a New World, then leave a like and an abo, and don't forget to write your opinion about my story in the comment section down below, and I hope you really liked it. And if you now want to see the newest video I uploaded, you can click on the left side of the screen On the right side of the screen you can see now the playlist, if I made one, I'm not sure. And then see you later, alligator, and take care, goodbye.